When you talked about that vulnerability in your video, I thought your point too. But I was reminded of the verse that talks about if you don't love your neighbors, how do you say that you love God?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that verse when it comes to that aspect of vulnerability with God and with others?
Well, I don't think the verse is saying that you have to love others first before you love God, because it's impossible for us to love people if we have not first received God's love. Because the love that we're pouring out to people is that love is coming from God. One way that I think we can look at that verse is the hypocrisy when we claim that we love God, but yet we hate our brother. So the text is pointing out you don't actually love God because you don't love your brother, or you don't love your brother because you don't love God. So love for God always comes first. So when it comes to vulnerability, we are unable to be vulnerable with people because we can't be vulnerable with God. I've realized in my marriage, every time there's a breakdown in communication on my part, I always have to stop and think, what is my prayer life currently? What is my prayer life currently? And when I'm actually reflecting on that, I notice that there is a breakdown in my communication with God. And so that's why I think it's important to be vulnerable, because vulnerability itself is a gift. It's a grace that God gives us, and then we gift it to someone else. We can't do that on our own.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I was thinking about that verse, but then I think that you made it make more sense. So, in essence, from what I hear you saying is, if you say that you have a relationship with God and you're treating others disrespectfully, or in this case, if you're lying, well, not in this case, but if you're lying to others, you can't say that you love God, because the whole definition of God is to not act this way. Or if you consider yourself a Christian or God fearing, you would not act this way. So it's different it's different in the aspect of vulnerability, because in order to be vulnerable with others, God has to teach you. You have to be at his feet first so that he can teach you how to become vulnerable with others.
Right. And I do want to clarify, because especially in the age of social media and the tendency to just vent out and to say what's on our mind, we confuse that with vulnerability. That kind of venting out is cheap. It's a cheap form of vulnerability, just airing out whatever's on your mind. That's not the kind of vulnerability that God desires for us. It is not, because in Proverbs 29:13, I believe it says, a fool vents out everything that's on his heart, but a wise person holds it back. Is the Bible actually saying that you shouldn't say what's on your heart? That's not what the Bible is saying. But it's talking about a self-restraint that you're able to exercise, and a nakedness that is appropriate for the level of relationship. So when you have someone saying, I want to be vulnerable, but you go out on social media and you expose everything, that's literally you going in the middle of a busy mall or in the middle of Times Square and stripping down butt naked and saying, this is me being vulnerable. No, that's being a fool. That's not what God is calling us to. He's calling us to a higher level of vulnerability. But when you can expose your heart at the right time to the right person, that is true vulnerability. So it's not just this saying whatever on your mind, venting out whatever you're feeling and so forth. And all of us have to learn this level of self-restraint, right? And so that's something that I'm learning as well when it comes to vulnerability.
Yes, that's I used to not want to be vulnerable at all. I used to think, why would I open up myself for people to hurt me? I remember I was in this relationship, and my boyfriend at the time, we used to debate vulnerability. I didn't even want to be vulnerable with him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he would talk to me about how it's important to be vulnerable. And I just did not understand that concept at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm saying that, though, my mom used to tell me all the time when I was a kid to be discreet. Now, I probably was one of those kids
Mm.
who shared everything. You know how kids are. Oh, I ate mangoes last night for dinner. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, just they say everything that comes to their mind. Maybe I was one of those kids. But even though I had this vulnerability issue, I do remember my mom telling me all the time to be discreet. So that's definitely this balance that we need to learn. Well, at least
Right.
I'm speaking for myself, because it really is important. You don't want to share everything. You want to have some type of reserve, and then
Mm-hmm.
share things when it's appropriate to whom it's appropriate to share it with. So I do like your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. It reminds you, it sounds like you're talking about going from one extreme to the other extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that other proverb, I don't remember where it's from, but it says, like a gold ring in the in the snout of a pig, so is a woman without discretion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking about women who just put everything out there, not just emotionally and verbally, but also physically, just exposing everything. But there is that level of needing to share, because a part of love is sharing, not just sharing your food, not just sharing your resources, not just sharing your money, but also sharing your heart. And so we can tend to develop a stingy attitude with our heart. No, this is mine. My emotions are mine. My feelings, my thoughts are mine. I don't want to share them with you. And the tighter you hold on to it, just like money, it doesn't do any good.
And that's something I think that a lot of single people might have a struggle with. When you,
I'm
let's
sure.
say, especially some people, especially those of us who have been hurt in relationships in the past, you come out of that relationship just really, really closed off, right? And then you're wondering why intimate relationships are not happening for you. Well, it's because you're not really developing that vulnerability aspect. In order to love, you need to be vulnerable. And that's
That's
something
right.
that I actually started learning very recently, maybe a year ago. I'll
Mm-hmm.
stretch it and say a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, that's really important. Which brings me to one question. Do you think that there are certain things that should not be discussed in marriage, in the moment, or forever for that matter?
Yeah, I remember coming to this question and I took a deep breath. I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting one." I would start off by saying that in marriage, for sure there are difficult things to discuss. It's not everything is going to be very easy to talk about. In regards to things that should not be discussed, one of the first things that came to mind is maybe the details of past sexual experiences. However, in some cases where infidelity has taken place in the marriage, maybe the other spouse wants some kind of detail about whatever happened, and they feel like it's necessary for them to talk about that. But I don't think that's a very usual case or should happen in every case. So I think, I don't know if we should say, these are certain topics that I will not discuss. I will not discuss my exes. I will not discuss this. I will not, because it's closing off rooms or doors in your heart that this person should have access to. But we should have the recognition that there are going to be things that are tough to discuss. But I can't think of anything that absolutely should not be discussed, except I would say, details of past sexual experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. This is another point that you brought up in your video that I thought was very interesting. One of the verses that you brought up, well, you didn't bring up the verse specifically, but thou shalt not lie God, it's very clear in the Bible that we shouldn't lie, right? But when someone says, "How are you?" "I'm fine." What are some alternative answers when someone asks you how you are, but you know you cannot discuss it right now? You don't feel safe enough to discuss it. The person is not very, you don't think that the person is a good person to discuss how you are, or you just don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are some alternative answers for that?
Yeah. How I would say that is it depends. The responses depends on the relationship and who it is that is asking you. For instance, if it is an acquaintance, someone that I do not know very well, I don't interact much with them, we don't have any depth to our relationship, I will not pour out my heart to that person. And I think I would respond to an individual, "I'm well." If I'm going through a particular season where things are tough for me emotionally, I would say I'm well. Not that I'm lying, but in the grand scheme of things, knowing that my hope is in the Lord, and whatever I'm going through, it is in God's hands. God is sovereign. I am well. The same way, I would use this example, and I definitely need to study more. The woman in whose son died. I don't remember which chapter it was in First Kings or Second Kings, when her son died, and the prophet Elijah sent the servant to ask her, it's a Shunammite woman, ask her if everything is okay. And she responded, "It is well." Was everything well? Her son was dead. But when she met the servant, she didn't pour out her heart to the servant. It was like, "My son died." No. She responded to the servant, "It is well." But when she got to the prophet, whom she had a deeper relationship with, whom she knew was a man of God, the Bible says she just dropped at his feet and held his feet, and she poured out her heart to him. It depended on the relationship. So I would respond to an acquaintance, "I am well." To a friend, I would give a little bit more depth. I'm walking through a tough season. I'm looking forward to the brighter side. Everything is okay, and depending on how the person responds, maybe you will know if you should share more, because most people are asking you, "How are you?" out of courtesy and politeness, but not necessarily because they want to know. But if you share that kind of response, perhaps the other friend might want to have more sincerity and be like, "You want to tell me about that?" But if it is your lover, and when I say lover, I mean your spouse, someone close to you or intimates, you can be more forthcoming. "Something is on my mind, but I'm finding it hard to talk about right now. Something is on my mind. I don't know how to express it. It's difficult for me. I don't know if I'll get through talking about it." Leave it there and give your spouse an opportunity to help you unpack it.
Okay. And we're almost nearing the end. I do want to ask one more question before we get into the New Wives Club and other things like that. What can you tell ladies who are struggling to be vulnerable, struggling to communicate, ask for what they want or need in a relationship or in general? What encouragement do you have for ladies who feel that they are in that category?
The first thing I would say, and I know if I was on the other side of this and someone responded the way I'm going to respond, I would probably scoff at it. But I would still say pray first. Because if you haven't placed your request in the ear of God, then it has no business in the ear of a man. And that's to learn that lesson is very valuable and will help us a lot. Your prayer time will give you, for instance, if you're in a relationship and you want to ask something, but you're not sure how to ask or the timing and so forth, in your prayer time, that will come, that will develop. So definitely praying. using words specifically like I would like, I need, and follow it up with what do you think, or is that possible? Do you think it's possible? Do you think this is something that you can do? Because what you are recognizing is that even though you ask for something, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it. Right? And we as women need to learn to exercise the maturity of women when a request is denied, not just by your spouse, but even by God. And we have to recognize that not everything we ask for should be given. As it says in James 4, verse 3, I believe, that you ask, but do not receive, because you ask with impure motives. And I would also say, make sure if you're in a relationship and you want to express your needs, your wants, your desires, or thoughts on your mind, make sure that you are doing your part that makes someone willing to please you and fulfill your wishes. So if you are being disrespectful to your husband, if you're belittling him, if you are not submitting to him, why do you have the expectation that he will want to fulfill your desires? But when a man knows that you love him, that you respect him, he will lay down his life for you. God has put that in him. I remember telling my husband one time, I like the fan on in the room when I'm sleeping because I like the room extra cool. And he gets really cold. I get really hot. And when I expressed that that's what I wanted, my husband went and changed the whole light fixture and the electrical thing in the room to automate the fan to come on at a certain time every night just for me. Because I wake up in the middle of the night and I can tell the certain times. So to see him go to that extent, for me to say, this is what I would want, right? I have seen him do a lot of things. But listen, when I am being very moody, do you think I am fostering in him a desire to please me? No. That's even with God. Not that God is like man, but God even expressed to the children of Israel, you're not listening, you're not obedient. And what did God do? Not just, he withheld the rain and the crops, not to be petty, but because there was just so much going on. But we see even with God, he's like, your prayers become an abomination because of the state of your heart. You're lifting up your hands, but they are bloody and I'm not hearing. He said, your new moons, your festival, your Sabbaths are disgusting to me because your heart is elsewhere. That's God. And so with our husbands, when we don't have a heart that's submissive, when we don't have a heart that's respectful, that's loving and kind and gentle, our requests to our husband disgust him. And he wants to have nothing to do with the chocolates and the flowers that you want for Valentine. It repels him. And so it's not just a matter of these are the words that I say. More than that, it is what is the attitude of your heart. That has to be the basis. And then from the attitude of your heart, from your being, from your identity, from your safety in Christ, the Spirit will give you how to articulate your needs and wants and desires.
You have heard what Felicia has had to say. She has just dropped gems. And I know that you have gleaned a lot from what she just shared with us. So, Felicia, tell us about your New Wives Club.
Yeah, the New Wives Club is an online community. It's an online faith-based community for newly married women. And it's all based on Titus chapter 2, verse 3 to 5, where older women are instructed to teach younger women how to love their husbands, how to love their children, how to keep their home, how to do good so that God's word would not be blasphemed. And so we believe that when you're coming into marriage, you need support and guidance from spirit-filled women to know how to navigate a godly marriage. And that's what we're trying to provide for newly married women. We've been meeting for about 2 years now. And this year we're expanding to provide, a community for women who've been married for longer than 3 years. So we just invite any married woman to join, to sign up for one of the clubs. And I know for me, it has been a huge blessing having access to that kind of community. And I know other women will be blessed by it as well.
That's really awesome. How can the ladies, if someone's listening who is newly married, how can she join the New Wives Club?
Yeah, so I have we have a form to fill out, but one of the easiest ways is just get in touch with me through email, FeliciaParkley@gmail. And we're working on getting our Instagram account up and ready, but that's just going to be New Wives Club. The handle is New Wives Club. But right now, email, and I'm on Facebook as well, Felicia, that's with a E, Felicia Lee, Lee, and we can connect through there.
Okay. And how else can ladies who are listening get in contact with you? Just Facebook, or do you have a website or anything?
Facebook and email is the main way. I have a website for my natural hair course and program. That is faithandfro.com. That's another great way.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that information.
Oh, on YouTube. YouTube too.
Okay, YouTube. And that's Felicia Lee.
That's right.
I'll be linking all of what you just said down in the description box for ladies to just, click and find you. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of this information and taking the time to be here with us. I know you have a lot going on, so thank you again. And I really enjoyed my time, and let's keep in contact.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anne, for doing this and providing this for women.